Spent most of the last few years focused on trying to address some of the biggest social issues facing the internet and that our company in particular is at the center of. And the four big ones that we've focused on are election security and preventing election interference. So through working through these issues, we've made a lot of progress on each of them. We've built up our systems internally in elections, which I'm sure we'll get into in a bit. There have been many elections around the world over the last couple of years. The results have been a lot cleaner online due to a lot of the work that we and others have done in partnership. But in order to solve these issues, you get down to some fundamental trade-offs and values that I don't think people would want private companies to be making by themselves. And in a lot of these areas around, for example, what constitutes political speech and what should be acceptable advertising around an election, I really don't think that as a society we want private companies to be the final word on making these decisions. So where I've come out is, look, in the absence of regulation on some of these things, we're going to do the best that we can and build up very sophisticated systems to be able to handle these issues. But at the end of the day, I don't think that is necessarily the ideal state that we all want to be in. I think we would be better off if we had a more robust democratic process setting the rules on how we wanted to arbitrate and draw some of the trade-offs between a lot of these values that we hold dear.
Let's talk about the integrity of the electoral process and foreign interference with elections. A lot of people in the United States are, of course, concerned about that. Can you say a little bit about what you've done specifically since 2016 to reduce the risk and what you'd like to see, say, Senator McConnell and Senator Schumer agree on in the next few years on the regulatory front?
Getting election integrity right is probably the highest priority of these issues. And there's no single silver bullet, but there are a number of different strategies that we've taken as a company to prevent state actors like what we've seen Russia do and tried to do in the 2016 elections. From being able to do that again in elections around the world, including the 2018 US midterms and upcoming the 2020 election. No. The things that have made the biggest difference are, one is building up really sophisticated technical AI systems and hiring a whole lot of people. We have 30,000 people at Facebook who work on content and safety and safety review, to be able to find these networks of bad actors, to be able to take them off the systems before they have the opportunity to spread propaganda or misinformation or whatever they're spreading. We've gotten much more sophisticated at that. It's an arms race. Russia and other folks have also gotten more sophisticated in their tactics. Every election we see new tactics, but through a big investment in this, we're able to stay ahead and keep the progress going on that. We've also upgraded the policies. So now anyone who wants to run political ads or issue ads, or run a page that gets a lot of distribution, needs to verify their identity with us with a valid government ID. We've rolled this out in the U.S. and we've rolled it out across the world. It's quite a large operation to be able to do that because we have 7 million advertisers overall, not all of whom are trying to engage in political or issue ads, but that's a big deal. But that would prevent people from other countries from being able to advertise in elections where the law might prevent them from doing that. Transparency requirements with working with intelligence agencies and election commissions around the world. Again, this isn't an American only issue. I mean, we just had the big elections in the EU, for example, and there's a big election in India. And the EU Parliament president came out. I went and testified in the EU, similar thing to what I did here in Congress in the US. And the EU parliamentary president, after the EU elections, came out and said that Facebook, basically, that we were able to deliver on what we said we were going to leading up to the elections, and that he thought that it was a relatively clean election because of that. From a regulatory perspective, what would I want to see? We actually are doing all of the things that are in it already. A lot of it is the verifying political advertisers, it's transparency around who's advertising. But, I wouldn't just want those policies to be enforced on Facebook. I think you want them enforced across the whole internet. So having a bill like that passed as the floor, I think would be positive. There are other types of laws around the world that I think would be positive as well. For example, we had an issue in, this is not an American example, but we had an issue in Ireland. In the last year, there was a referendum on abortion. And during that election, leading up to that referendum, a bunch of pro-life American groups advertised in this leading up to this Irish election to try to influence public opinion there. Then we went to the Irish and asked folks there, how do you want us to handle this? You have no laws on the books that are relevant for whether we should be allowing this kind of speech in your election. And really, this doesn't feel like the kind of thing that a private company should be making a decision on. And their response at the time was, we don't currently have a law, so you need to, make whatever decision you want to make. We ended up not allowing the ads. But at the end of the day, that feels like the kind of thing around the world in different democracies that you'd really want the local countries to be deciding for themselves what kind of discourse they want and what kind of advertising they want in their elections, not a private company. So that's kind of a flavor of this. But I mean, overall, the laws around election advertising are very out of date. Right? I mean, what we've seen, a lot of laws around elections today are basically political ads are defined as ads around a candidate or an election specifically. That's not really what we saw Russia do primarily in 2016. They tried to get people agitated around different issues. So, if you want to play and prevent that, it's more important to broaden out the laws to focus on things that are more issue oriented and not just around elections and candidates specifically. And also, the nature of elections now is they're kind of permanent campaigns before an election, and that reflects the modern threats that we see around the world.
A zero tolerance policy. And that transparency is a good first step, but not adequate if people have to do a little work to get what's transparent, or if they've done that work and they've still seen the ad, which suggests that some parts of America are evil and other parts of America are worse than evil, or that some political candidates are systematically crime committers. Wouldn't it be better to have something that would be a zero tolerance policy that specified the categories with particularity? Call it beyond transparency.
Well, I think that the challenge here is that a lot of the messages that are being sent are speech that would be acceptable if it were Americans doing it, participating in American elections. So, a lot of what we saw, for example, was simultaneous running of campaigns on both sides of an issue. Take immigration, for example. So, there would be a campaign to argue for immigration reform and a campaign to argue against immigration reform. And the campaign for immigration reform might look a lot like what someone in the US advocating for immigration reform would do, but if it's done through a network of fake accounts, created outside of the country, then that's not allowed in our political discourse, so we then have the means to go and take that down. But a lot of the time it's not actually the content that's harmful, which is why it's so important to act upstream of the content. Sorry, it's not that the content isn't harmful, it's not that the content itself would be prohibited. It's the actors and the way that they're engaging that is prohibited. Which is why the partnerships with the intelligence community and election commissions are so important, because that's how we get the signals to say, hey, there's something going on over here that we should look into. This is a network of fake accounts. Let's go take that down before it gets closer to an election or a sensitive time where something might happen.
I'm worried that America's enemies aren't quite worried enough yet. Would it be good for you to have, as part of your standards, a specified list of things which wouldn't be limited to, during campaign ads, but would be, as you say, ongoing campaign, efforts to sow division, and if it's being done by an American as an effort, let's say, to be pretty provocative about what the other side thinks, that's fine, but it's an effort by someone who's not particularly friendly to us to put us apart from each other. Like in a Twilight Zone episode. Maybe that would be part of the prohibited community standard.
So, yeah, I mean, the tools are constantly evolving to find the bad actors and take them down, and that's an ongoing partnership with the security community. But I think you're pointing to an interesting point, which is that as a private company, we don't have the tools to make the Russian government stop. Right? Or for, I mean, we can defend as best as we can, but our government is the one that has the tools to apply pressure to Russia, not us, right? So, one of the mistakes that I worry about is, after 2016, when the government didn't take any kind of counteraction, the signal that was sent to the world was that, okay, we're open for business. Countries can try to do this stuff, and our companies will try their best to try to limit it. But fundamentally, there isn't going to be a major recourse from the American government. And we are very engaged in kind of ramping up the defenses. The amount that we spend on safety and security now as a company, it's billions of dollars a year. It is greater than the whole revenue of our company was when we went public earlier this decade. Right, so we've ramped up massively on the security side.